Well, thanks, Lisa. Thanks, Richard. It's great being here. I have had some experience visiting Nebraska before. My home state's Wisconsin, and my experience is driving from Utah to Wisconsin. And I approach Nebraska and I go, oh my God, I've got to drive all the way across Nebraska. And then if you're going east, you got to go across Iowa after that, and then northern Illinois isn't that exciting either. But that being said, first I want to compliment the committee here on this big idea and this series of seminars. I think this is a great idea. I've enjoyed the day. We went out and visited 9 Mile Prairie this morning, which was pretty cool, although I didn't get the spectacular view of the Capitol because of the fog. And then meeting a number of faculty today and talking about tourism and ecotourism and heritage tourism and such. And what you just saw is put out by the Utah Office of Tourism, and it's an assets video. And so, I think the theme of your seminar series, Scenery as a Natural Resource, ties right into that because, if you saw that, there's so much scenery in there that we consider an amenity, and the Utah Office of Tourism's role, and I'll speak to this a little bit later, is basically to market that scenery, outdoor recreation and tourism opportunities on a lot of public lands in Utah to out-of-state visitors. And so I come bearing the message, we want all you Cornhuskers to get on I-80, head west, come out to Utah and spend your money. And yesterday when I left home up in northern Utah in Logan, we had 3 inches of snow. And so it's starting to snow out there, and hopefully we're going to have a good ski season. So let me just give you a little background quick on our Institute for Outdoor Recreation and Tourism. In 1998, the legislature passed this bill, and it provided a funding mechanism to support the Institute. And I was hired, and this is kind of our mission, and I'll hand out these little bookmarks, and there's a little bit more of an explanation on the back there, and it gives you the web address in case you're interested in checking it out. So, this is basically our mission: provide a better understanding between the relationships. First, outdoor recreation and tourism, it's in our name, natural resources management, and we're in the College of Natural Resources, but the relationship of those to the economic vitality of communities in the state also tied into quality of life issues. So this is kind of our charge, and we do this basically. USU is a land-grant institution just like University of Nebraska is, so we've got these functions or the missions of research, extension, and teaching, but our focus is on outdoor recreation and tourism issues, but tied into this idea of the relationship of those to the sustainability of communities and sustainability of the environment. So we apply those functions to that, and then we also have the charge of facilitating statewide collaboration and coordination. So we work with a lot of different agencies, a lot of different groups, even individuals. I have done some consultation with farmers and ranchers with respect to developing agricultural tourism. So that's a little bit about us. Tourism in general, tourism for prosperity and peace. And here's the prosperity piece, if you will. Number one industry in many countries, fastest growing economic sector, interest in foreign exchange earnings and job creation, largest export earner, certainly one of the world's most important sources of employment, and it also stimulates investment in infrastructure that can benefit local residents. And then, of course, government is interested in it because of the substantial tax revenues that are generated. And then here's the peace piece, if you will. The idea that tourism really facilitates intercultural awareness and personal friendships and can be powerful forces with respect to improving understanding, the big picture, contributing to world peace. So it's the ideal, but certainly we think that tourism really kind of assists with this. Well, let's see, I'm an academic, so we need to define things, right? So here you have a definition from the World Tourism Organization. activities of persons traveling to and staying in places outside their usual environment. They've got a time frame in there. Notice that business is included, business travel, so that can be considered tourism. And basically, tourists are not paid to do this, okay? But, I think this is an important piece. Tourism really relies on this development and utilization of natural, historical, cultural, human resources in a specific place, and these are the attractions and destinations. And then it converts the uses of those, what we call amenity resources, into income-producing assets. And that's one of the reasons why there's so much interest in tourism and tourism development, is because of the economic impact. So, we have direct spending on kind of tourism items, if you will, here, but certainly the effects sort of trickle down or ripple throughout the economy, and they're felt in a lot of different sectors also. And I've always sort of liked just this little graphic. You got the travelers up here. They're engaged in some form of transportation to get to their destination, and while they're there, they're spending money on a variety of different things. Well, this generates wages and salaries for the workers, profits for companies, taxes for state, local governments. You've got the input of outside goods and services, but hopefully there's an emphasis also on utilizing local goods and services. And in turn, these folks are spending money locally also. And so you get kind of a multiplier effect, where a tourist might spend $1, but that dollar is circulating throughout the local economy, and it may end up, well, it's usually about $1.80 for recreation and tourism. Looking at some trends, tourism trends. So first of all is this idea, I think in our society and worldwide in many societies, of this importance of experience. We've really transitioned to an experience-based economy, and natural and cultural resources, amenities, play a very, very important role here. What are tourists want? They're seeking new and unique, self-fulfilling experiences, and it's not that traditional tourism activities have gone away, it's that they're being augmented by a lot of new, if you will, forms of tourism. So adventure travel, certainly all the recreation, transportation, nature tourism, ecotourism, we'd have wildlife viewing and bird watching in there, ag tourism, and cultural heritage tourism. And I want to look at these, and I kind of want to share in general some information on these. Look at Utah, but also look at Nebraska. I mean, certainly some things are certainly happening currently in Nebraska, but in my discussions, with folks today, certainly not at capacity in a number of different tourism activities, and there's potential for more development. This is why we're interested in it. Spending, jobs, tax revenue, and the Travel Industry Association America, a couple years out, are expecting this to be over 10% of GDP. Tell me if this is true for you. Well, first I should ask, are there any tourists in here? Okay, a few. That's good to see. So one trend, more frequent, shorter vacations rather than one long vacation each year. When I was growing up, Mom and Dad packed my sister and I in the station wagon, and off we went for like a 2-3 week vacation. And that's not really the case anymore. Growing interest in vacations that involve doing, experiencing, and learning. And this is especially important with ag tourism and cultural heritage tourism. And then this idea that tourists want to experience a package of activities. They're looking for variety. Okay, they're not necessarily going to go to one place and do one thing and be satisfied with that experience. Wiley has kind of come up with what he calls a new tourism, and a lot of this is happening already, and you can see on some of the bullets, I'm not going to go through them all, but a lot of this has to do with the focus on tourists as consumers. We're all individuals with different needs and incomes and time constraints and certainly different travel interests. And, it's still large-scale consumption, if you will, but these tourists, they're more experienced, they're more educated, They're more destination oriented, they're more independent, more flexible, and very, very often they're more green. They're interested in having a minimal amount of impact on the resource that they're visiting. And this is very, very important. I think this ties into the theme of the Big Ideas seminar here. They're looking at the environment and the local culture in these destinations as a key part of their vacation experience. And again, that ties kind of into the learning and the peace. Another theme with respect to the development and use of our natural resources, more and more emphasis is being placed on the value of amenity resources, and scenery and aesthetics is right on the top here. Certainly opportunities for a diversity of recreation experiences, and then we now know, that when we have healthy ecosystems, these are very important for ecological services. So, we're kind of getting a double, maybe even a triple benefit here. Public lands. Very, very important in Utah with respect to tourism, this powerful combination of leisure travel and America's great outdoors. And we think, at least with trends, this is going to continue to increase in importance. A primary destination, public lands for a growing number of outdoor recreation activities and tourism businesses. So there's the economic development or impact component. And so, this again is very, very important with out in Utah with respect to actually state government and the industry and public land managers working in close partnerships with respect to policies and marketing and development goals. And the whole idea is sustainability related to these high quality natural and cultural landscape attractions that are out there. And then also the gateway community infrastructure, again, small business impact there. How many of you have visited Utah? Okay, good. Well, keep going on I-80 West, because we still want you to come out, and I'll try to get some Utahns to come east to Nebraska. But just to give you a sense of what's going on, we're very federal. Almost 2/3 of our state is in the federal domain. Not quite 8% is state lands, tribal lands, and then not quite 22% is private lands. And just to give you a little more of a breakdown, the Bureau of Land Management, 43% of the state, almost 14% for the Forest Service, and then we sort of have a combination of wildlife refuges, National Park Service, wilderness areas and such. With respect to outdoor recreation, that does occur on state lands, state trust lands, wildlife reserves, and Utah state parks. So, but when we compare that to Nebraska, and actually it's rather significant here, right? You look at this line, basically when you get to the Rocky Mountains or the Western Great Plains, much more federal land in the West, and historically there are reasons for that. But comparing Utah with Nebraska, Utah is a bit larger total square miles, but look at the difference with respect to federal lands. Not even 1.5% in Nebraska. Population, Utah is about 1 million more, but there's more density, and that's because 4/5 of our population is concentrated in a 120-mile corridor along what we call the Wasatch Front. So real difference there. Lots of information up here, but here's tourism impact in Utah. This, by the way, is the Utah brand, and the early years when I was serving on the board for the Utah Office of Tourism, we developed this brand, and focus groups were involved, and we did research with respect to how people would react to the brand, and we had to get Governor Huntsman's approval for that, and he liked it, and we're still using that. So now tourism arrivals, these are not residents, okay? These are out-of-state visitors, 20.2 million. You can sort of see what they're visiting. They spent $6.5 billion. They generated $842 million in state and local taxes, and so this puts tourism in the top 5 of the employment sectors, and you can sort of see the job numbers there. Okay, here's Nebraska. So this is coming from your Tourism Commission, fairly recent. Now this top bullet, this is Nebraskans and out-of-state visitors together, okay, making 19.3 million trips in the state that were over 100 miles or more away from their homes. So that's less than Utah. The spending is less, okay, but still significant. It does make tourism the third largest earner of revenue from outside of the state after agriculture and manufacturing. So this is probably not news to you. Agriculture number one, manufacturing number two, tourism number three might be a surprise. There's tax revenue that's generated, and there's the jobs. Okay, so it is significant in your state, this thing we call tourism and the economic impact and tax revenues and jobs and incomes and salary. In that report, this is just a sampling of attractions. And I suppose not surprisingly, Henry Dorley, is that how it's pronounced? Oh, everybody's been there, okay? Over 1 million plus, that's in Omaha. In fact, I'm going to try to take that in tomorrow because I haven't been there. But these are some others, and there were some others on the list too. But notice a lot of these are outdoor recreation oriented, scenery oriented, not the Disneyland, not the Las Vegas, not what we would call mass tourism. And certainly with respect to the guide, the travel guide, which I think is a good one, what do you notice on the cover? Okay, well I didn't know the name of the lake, but I noticed a large lake and beautiful skies, open space, scenery. And on the opening slide I had, we've got our delicate arch on the Utah tourism guide. So again, scenery is being marketed. Signage. Okay, you probably know the 2002 Olympic Winter Games came to Salt Lake and the different venues around the state. And then, I'd say within the last 2 years, there was a campaign that people were getting tired of that sign and let's get something new. And so a number of new road signs were developed, and they're themed with respect to the part of the state they're in. And let me just show you a little video clip here on that.
Motorists entering Utah now have something new to look at besides our fabulous scenery. State welcome signs.
35 new Welcome to Utah signs are now in place at welcome centers, at interstates and highways at the state's borders. Alex Burr was covering the story for us. Alex, the signs are not all the same, right?
That's right, Bruce. There are 7 different designs depending on where you enter Utah. Now, the old signs were all the same, celebrating the 2002 Winter Olympics. Now, all those old pictures you have of entering Utah, well, it's time to get new photos. Besides the weather, not much changes in the small town of Portage, just off I-15 on the Utah-Idaho border. But when a new sign was recently put up, a lot of people noticed right away.
It is a nice design. It's nice to have something new.
Rita Schonenberger lives in the house closest to the new sign. You can only see the back of it from her house, but on the other side is Utah's newest design, welcoming people into the state.
It's going to be fun to see how many new tourists stop by and get their picture with it.
This sign features the Wasatch Mountains in Salt Lake City, but there are other designs. In Vernal, there's a dinosaur. Near Moab, Delicate Arch. By Snowville, it's the meeting of the railroads. 7 different designs in all, now in place at welcome centers and state lines across the state.
One sign doesn't do it for Utah. We've got many different vistas, venues, different kind of climates, different kind of topography, geography.
During a ceremony this morning, state officials celebrated the 35th and final sign put into place, one welcoming people arriving from the Salt Lake Airport.
Welcome signs are the front porch of our state.
Overall, the signs cost about $500,000, paid for by UDOT and the Utah Office of Tourism at signage collection points over the past 3 years. Already, they're getting attention.
Visitors immediately upon coming to the state are pulling over and having their pictures taken alongside the signs.
That's what residents in Portage are seeing, saying it's nice to see so many people excited about something new.
You see a lot of people stopping and taking pictures, and it's really interesting.
Now, the signs are expected to last between 10 and 12 years. If you'd like to see all 7 of the new designs, we have links to them on our website, ksl.com.
We hope they make everybody feel welcome here in
Yeah.
Utah.
Welcome to Utah, home of
You know, what kind of stands out in this signage that you saw? Yeah.
Most of the signs are all focused on the natural landscapes.
Exactly. The scenery that the state, again, is marketing to visitors, okay? And, I mean, the UOT, that's Utah Office of Tourism, they do that because of state legislation. They are charged with marketing the amenities, which include natural resources in Utah, to out-of-state visitors, okay? Now, I bring this up because I found something that was really interesting, and this was on the Utah Office of Tourism's kind of e-newsletter. Kathy McKillip, who I understand is relatively new to the Nebraska State Tourism Commission, and this was in your World Herald. Is that in Omaha? Okay. So you're getting a redesign of your signs. I don't believe these are up yet because this is pretty new, and you know, you can see. So I like these signs, but you know, again, what do you see there? You know, you see some scenic features. You also see some heritage features, and that's what I didn't see in the fog this morning, and I still haven't seen. Okay, but maybe tomorrow morning. So I'm not surprised with this because there is a National Association of Tourism Commission, Tourism Office Association, and these directors and staff, they meet and they talk to each other. And I think this is kind of cool because it illustrates kind of collaboration, not reinventing the wheel, taking something that's working in one state and adapting it to, you know, a different state. So I thought that was pretty neat. Okay, let's turn to natural resources-based tourism. And you know, there are some definitions out here. Tourism activities and experiences dependent on the attributes associated with natural and relatively undeveloped settings. Then the second bullet there involves small groups of tourists, often includes opportunities related to local culture and or the natural environment. I like that, except for small groups, because I have seen natural resources-based tourism where there's huge groups. You know, for example, if anybody has ever been to Moab, Utah for the Easter Jeep Festival, it is a mob, but you know, for Moab, it's great. So we look at this, you know, with respect to community tourism development, and these are some shots, winter shot in Park City downtown, and then a summer shot. And a lot of the communities, especially in rural parts of the state, have these natural and cultural resources and amenities that are attractive for tourism development. And there's opportunities that exist for related business development. And I think that the same is true in Nebraska, okay? So here's kind of a message we send, that with respect to community tourism development, the focus should be on the development of compatible yet dispersed tourist businesses, obviously to help vitalize the local economy. And this is really important because you want the tourists to come to your town or your county or your destination and have it be a destination. You don't want them to pass through quickly. Why might that be?
They don't spend any money.
They don't spend as much money, okay? Now, that being said, there are some rural communities in Utah that aren't really into this tourism thing, you know, and they would rather have the visitors just come through, fill, you know, the gas tank up, have a meal, and be on their way to somewhere else. But the economic impact is not the same. So here's this theme of developing a package of activities and experiences that are going to attract those visitors, convince them to make an extended trip. And it's not necessarily that, you know, they're going to have to stay in one place, excuse me, but they're going to be around a little bit longer. And so a message we push in our tourism development work is this. We've got these natural allies: outdoor rec and nature tourism, ag tourism, and cultural heritage tourism. And those can come together to form a really great package that becomes attractive to visitors. So let's look at outdoor recreation first. What's the theme of your seminar here? 80% of tourists say scenery is one of the top considerations in selecting a place to travel. Here's some Fastest growing outdoor rec activities. This was done, Forest Service does this national survey, I think every 4-6 years or something. You notice those are all outdoor recreation. And then this was a study that the Outdoor Industry Foundation did in 2006, and what they focused on is active outdoor recreation, which basically means non-motorized activities. And so, here's the idea of economic impact, this ripple effect, and they put out some data with respect to active outdoor recreation participants. 60 million Americans are biking, 45 million camping, 33 million fishing, hunting kind of in decline nationally. And that might be because of some access issues. Paddling, snow sports. Trail activities is again non-motorized. Look at wildlife viewing though. 66 million Americans are doing some form of wildlife viewing. Here's the economic impact of all that. The spending, the jobs, the taxes, retail sales and such. And then they say they took a conservative approach and they didn't include $30 billion of boat and other big ticket sales from wildlife-based rec, RV sales, so that's all motorized recreation. And when they add that all together, they're saying the active outdoor recreation economy pumps $900 billion into the U.S. economy every year. So also when we think of outdoor recreation, we have to think of the federal land management agencies. I teach a wildland recreation policy and planning course, and I call these the big four federal land management agencies. So I just wanted to kind of go through these quickly, looking at Utah, also looking at Nebraska. So here's gives you an idea, of what is in our national park system. And in 2010, there were 281 million recreational visits to the national park system. Here's a map of that. You notice certainly, some big parks, Yellowstone really being the first national park out in the west, really huge parks acreage-wise in Alaska, but also, scattered around the country. I would have to say that the 5 national parks in Utah are really an anchor for tourism because they're on people's radar. Zion National Park has the highest visitation. Anybody been to Zion? Okay, pretty beautiful place. Now, you don't have the resource of Zion here in Nebraska, but you got some other resources. Bryce Canyon is another one. Capitol Reef and Arches and Canyonlands, which are over near Moab. And again, this is our delicate arch, so this has become the icon of our state. There are other units in the national park system that are in Utah, a number of different national monuments that are really scattered across the state. And then we have Glen Canyon National Recreation Area in Lake Powell. And I thought this was kind of interesting. Utah has more shoreline than the entire West Coast because of Lake Powell. It's canyon country, and you get all this shoreline. And then our one national historic site, so where the Union and Central Pacific Railroads came together at Promontory Summit. So those are our units in the national park system. Nebraska has 4. Okay, Chimney Rock National Historic Site, so that's like Golden Spike. What's the history of that, the heritage? This is a test. Thank you, okay. Oregon Trail, California Trail. Then Scotts Bluff, and I think that was on the trail also. Okay, I haven't been out there yet. And then Agate Fossil Beds National Monument, okay, which is a resource. And then Homestead National Monument. Richard was telling me this is a brand new visitor center that they've built there. Okay, so 4 units. Now, you compare these, look at the scenery and the landscape to Utah, very, very different. In fact, I was in Capitol Reef Park one day, and I pulled over, on a wayside, and there was a car parked there from Indiana, and an older couple, And I got talking to him because I went to DePaul University in Indiana for my undergraduate. And this guy was a farmer in Indiana, and he said, boy, it's a good thing we've got good soil in Indiana because you sure as hell can't grow anything out here in Utah because it's all rock, okay? Different resource, and he was right, you know. Okay, the Forest Service, you know, again, it's a system, but, you know, very outdoor recreation focused. And in fact, studies have been done with respect to economic impact, and the impact of outdoor recreation on national forests and grasslands now exceeds the economic value related to logging and grazing. Okay, so that's been a change. And you can see, you know, again from the map, a lot of the big forests out in the west, you know, the Ozarks along the Appalachians, and then, you know, up north, and this was my old stomping grounds in northern Wisconsin way back when, the brown or national grasslands. We have 6 national forests. We used to have more, but the Uinta-Wasatch Cache has been consolidated, and that's the main forest that runs through the mountains right along the Wasatch Front. So this is kind of cool for Utah with respect to the residents, because right out the back door, 4/5 of the state's population has access to the Uinta-Wasatch Cache. And there's wilderness areas and there's trails. Many of the commercial ski resorts are, you know, on the forest and such. And then the other forests are in other parts of the state. Nebraska National Forest, and I always have trouble pronouncing this word. See, I'll let you pronounce it, right? Okay, up in here, and then again Nebraska and the McKelvey National Forest. Now, what do you notice about the difference in scenery? Yeah, significant, but still, you know, if you're talking about open space and, you know, open skies, we even were having a conversation about dark skies, which is kind of a new tourist phenomena. You know, these are good resources. Wild and scenic rivers, I bring this up because these are protected, set aside, designated because of outstandingly remarkable scenic, recreational, geologic, fish and wildlife, historic, cultural, and other similar values. And Utah only has one. In fact, we got it pretty recently when President Obama signed the Omnibus Public Lands Bill in 2009, and this is down in Zion. And so we finally have a first designated river. Nebraska has 2. Now let me see if I can pronounce this right. I learned this today. Niobrara? Somebody pronounce it. Okay, you know what I mean, all right? I was talking with Mark, and you know, he said they were doing studies up there with the pallid sturgeon and how water releases would affect the recreation, very popular for tubing, rafting, and such. And he basically said, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Mark, as long as the flows were maintained for good recreation, that would be a good thing for that sturgeon, okay? So, you know, kind of a double benefit there. And then this one I can pronounce, Missouri National Recreation River, 100-mile stretch, Nebraska, and there's 2 free-flowing stretches of the Missouri that make that up. So these would be, you know, obviously significant scenic resources, but also recreational and wildlife resources too. So nature tourism, number of different names for that. Again, kind of the focus here is this idea of conservation and certainly economic impact too, but wanting to, you know, to have minimum impact and then sustainability also. And so we need to think of the Fish and Wildlife Service and the National Wildlife Refuge System. You know, it's fairly big. Most of the acreage is up in Alaska. And, you know, you can see a map here. Basically, the history of this, a lot of these have been established along flyways. You know, the Pacific, Mississippi, and Atlantic flyways. We have 3 wildlife refuges in Utah. The Bear River is the largest, And it's not that, you can see it's a popular birding hotspot in northern Utah, and it's not that there's rare or uncommon or endangered species there. There's just a lot of species there. And the thing that's really cool is the number of birds that come through in the spring migration, just like you have here in Nebraska. So you have more national wildlife refuges than we do, okay, in a variety of different habitats and such. I learned a little bit about the great prairie chicken this morning. And then Richard turned me on to this, that you've got a Great Plains Center here at the University of Nebraska, and they did a study to determine the top 10 ecotourism sites in the region. And you can see they've defined what an ecotourism site is, provides an opportunity to experience nature. And again, here's the economic impact piece, but it's focused on the importance that it has to conservation. Okay, so in other words, the money that's being generated goes back to support the conservation of habitat and species. So this is one of your three. Anybody been there? Switzer? Okay, a few folks talked to me about that today. And the second one up in the Pine Ridge area. Okay, so a combination of state park. I believe this is probably Nebraska's only designated wilderness area. Actually, two. There's two, okay, thanks. And then this one. And so I told you about eastbound on I-80, and I actually, during our spring break, drove it because my dad had passed away and I had to go back to Wisconsin and settle his estate and do some other things. And so coming on the way back, I knew about the sandhill crane migration, and it was March. And so instead of blowing across Nebraska like I usually try to do, we stayed overnight in Grand Island. Okay, and we got up at dawn o'clock. Actually, it was before dawn o'clock. It was pitch black, and we had the information, and we're driving around the roads, and finally came to this place, and there was a bridge across the Platte, and I thought, oh, it's so early in the morning, Well, we got there were over a dozen cars in the parking lot already, and there was a ramp and a big, kind of elevated viewing platform, and all these crazy birders are out there. Okay, and this is what I saw that morning. It's almost exactly what we saw. How many of you have seen this? Okay. Ah! Boy, there's so many birds, they've covered the lens. At any rate, you get the idea. So, and it's not that sandhill cranes are rare or endangered. They hunt them in Utah. I know they hunt them out here. But it's just the magnitude of the number of birds that are there and kind of what this means, when you see this. And of course, this Rowe Bird Sanctuary, it certainly provides habitat for, a variety of other bird species and other animal and plant species too. So I thought that was pretty cool. So let's look at ag tourism pretty quickly. Again, there's a little definition up there of it. If you think of ag tourists, they're interested in having fun, but also learning and being actively involved. Again, the idea here is that it can generate supplemental income for owner-operators that want to get into this. And I've done some work, as I said, with ranchers and farmers out in Utah. Merges the world of travel and tourism, with farming, ranching, and our ag system. I think one of the things about this is our American society has lost touch about where and how our food is produced. Kids these days think food comes from the grocery store, and it comes in styrofoam and plastic and cardboard. And so, it's this connection which I think is a good thing. This is kind of hokey, but gives you an idea of, some different ag tourism activities and such. And then we also talk about value added. So things that aren't necessarily directly related to agricultural production, but can be a part of ag tourism. And so, there's lots of things that can be done here. I think Nebraska has a pretty good agritourism program. In fact, this book, which I can't read the title of, Nebraska Guide to Agritourism and Ecotourism Development. And it was actually, Nebraska Extension was a part of putting that together. And this I just pulled off a website, the idea that agritourism here, but here your governor is putting a plug in for it. 21% of all Nebraskans are employed in farm and farm-related jobs. Agriculture is the largest industry, with tourism ranked third. It makes good economic sense for producers to combine the two for a unique Nebraska experience. Remember one of the trends in tourism, okay? Tourists are looking for unique experiences. And then, again, there's the economic impact piece. Now, is Nebraska at capacity? Probably not, from, folks that I was talking to today. So there's opportunities there. The cultural heritage tourism, again, you sort of have a definition there. Authenticity, comes into play, representing the stories and people of the past. Here's the resources that are important to preserve for this. And again, there's economic benefit associated with that. And here's some little pop-ups of, heritage tourism activities. And I believe scenery is going to come up right there, okay? Driving tours. Who are these heritage tourists? Tend to be middle-aged, older individuals and couples, baby boomers, okay, like me. Why us? Well, a lot of us have higher levels of education. Consequently, we make or made more money. We've got disposable income, more discretionary time, and we're highly motivated, to experience this. And here's some motivations of heritage tourists. A form of escape from the everyday, fueled by nostalgia for things of the past. Gaining historical insight and knowledge, again, kind of that learning piece I was talking about earlier. Unique, authentic, non-commoditized attractions. We enjoy, interacting with other travelers, and, we look at it as an adventure, okay, in this too. So, related to this, I have to think of the National Trail System, okay? And moving quickly here, if you look at this, you can see trails all over the country, but what jumps out at you right there, and you all know this already, Nebraska, the Platte River Corridor, was the corridor for the trails heading out west. Why? It was the easiest place to travel, okay? So, you've got these National Historic Trails. I pulled this right off the Park Service website, and, this is St. Joseph River crossing with a Pony Express, but it also says Oregon and California Trail there. So, you do have like interpretive sites and places to visit that people are attracted to. Related to this also, and I didn't know about this before, but these, I got 8, but there's really 9 scenic and historic byways in Nebraska. And I thought this guide that the state had did a really good job of promoting and marketing those, especially because the theme here is this package of activities that tourists can do when they're traveling these byways. And, family activities, cultural heritage, agritourism and such. So, your Heritage Highway, Beatrice, this is where this Homestead National Monument of America is. I'm a history buff, and, again, in this Wildland Rec policy and planning course I do, we look at the Homestead Act and see how that helps settle the West. And I haven't been there, would like to. And then especially up kind of in the northwest part of your state, where Loop River Scenic Byway, Sand Hills Journey, Western Trails, and then Gold Rush. Here's some scenery for you. How many folks have seen that? Okay, reminds me of, is it Arizona or Nevada has Cadillacs stuck in the ground? So this would be an attraction, though. You would probably stop if you were, cruising. Okay, well, I'm sure it doesn't. And I just pulled it off the web. Okay? But I imagine a lot of people stop there and take photos of that. Okay? And then, finally, so in Utah we have two national heritage areas, the Mormon Pioneer and then the Great Basin, half of which is in Nevada. We have a state-recognized heritage area called the Bear River Heritage Area. We're trying to get federal designation for that. I couldn't find any in Nebraska, but I know you have lots of historic districts, landmarks, and historic places. And again, the theme of the seminar is really the scenery here, and this is a built environment, but I really think there's a strong connection between the landscape and the heritage, especially with the settlement of the country. And so this comes into play here, and these can become attractions. These are in Utah, of course. So all this sounds wonderful, doesn't it? Good stuff. But we know whenever there's tourism development, change comes along. There's associated impacts. If those impacts are positive, we consider them benefits. If they're negative, they're costs, and they can happen on a social level, on an economic or environmental level. So with respect to community development, it really becomes important to weigh the benefits and costs here. Try to determine who's what those benefits and costs are going to be, who's going to benefit, who's going to share the costs, are those costs acceptable, and here's kind of the goal. Can you minimize those costs while maximizing the benefits? So there are positives, especially when we focus on economic benefits, but negative social and environmental impacts are possible too. The tourism industry has been criticized for being exploitative sometimes, and so it's being approached with a sense of caution. And I've always liked this quote from Inskeep. It's kind of the idea of killing the goose that laid the golden egg, if you will. Again, if it's not planned for, if it's not managed properly. So here's a critical challenge, not degrade environmental resources, not, to negatively exploit human and cultural resources. Why? This idea of sustainability, sustainable development and use. And a couple of quotes. John Hunt used to be on our faculty at USU. So this idea of sustainability, it's been around for a while. And probably 20 years now with respect to tourism and tourism development. So here's some principles. Now, these are not always going to work in every situation, but it's certainly kind of an ideal. And with respect to the planning and development of tourism, especially at a community level, especially in many rural communities, these are very important to do, to be aware of and do. So we've had some successes out there, following this approach. And there have been some studies done on successful rural tourism development, and this becomes very, very important. The efforts that are more successful have these collaborative partnerships. Kind of losing my voice here, excuse me. This, one of the things that we kind of work on with respect to working with communities that are interested in tourism economic development is this, and I've got a number of slides that follow this, which I think I'm going to skip. But just real quick, the first step is to focus on the community, and this could be a rural community. Rural residents coming together, determining their vision, their values, the direction they want to move with the development of tourism resources. Here's an inventory, if you will, of the assets and attractions, many of which you can see are natural, scenic, outdoor rec, cultural heritage, certainly arts, community, and rural life. And here's the business side of it. Okay, so the opportunities for small business development. And I had a number of slides that get into detail here, but we could probably do an hour seminar on that, so we won't. And I think we got little time for questions or comments. Or you all want to get to the bars or home for dinner. Yeah.
You know, sometimes holiday opportunities, and I think one of your slides indicated that. I'm thinking about Halloween haunted houses and that kind of stuff. How does that fit into this, or does it? You know, some places are known for certain events.
Well, there's such thing called dark tourism now.
Well, I didn't mean just haunted houses.
Okay, well, when you said haunted, so dark tourism is people's attraction to places where bad things have happened, if you will.
Yikes.
Okay, so
Haunted houses, like places that are haunted.
well, you know, that's more of like a holiday celebration. I know in Nebraska and also in Utah, corn mazes are huge, as they are. Is that true? Because you got lots of corn, you can send people out there and they'll never come back, right? We have smaller cornfields, but a lot of that will incorporate under agricultural tourism.
Oh.
Okay, but the
Like the Corn Palace up in South Dakota.
Exactly. Yeah, it can be museums, it can be festivals and special events, it can be associated with holidays and such. This dark tourism is kind of disaster tourism. So over New Year's, I was in Hawaii on Oahu. We went to Pearl Harbor, okay, and visited the Arizona Memorial and learned that whole story there. So lots of visitation there, and people do it because they're kind of intrigued. Well, first of all, it's important in our history, but when you think about it, a lot of people died there, and there's still bodies entombed in the Arizona.
Well, and that's like the 9/11 Memorial.
Yep.
Or in
Same
Oklahoma
thing.
City,
Right.
the federal building.
Right. But yeah, kind of special event, holiday type tourism, that's big. I think Halloween has become a bigger and bigger holiday than it used to be.
It's gone crazy.
People go crazy decorating their homes in Utah for Halloween. So I don't even put up Christmas tree lights. So I do have some pumpkins on the front porch. So, yeah.
I saw the slide you had up there was a triangle of different points of ecotourism, and one of them was getting the local community members together and kind of encouraging them to find their direction. Do you have any advice for getting that started in the first place? I'm from a rural community.
Okay.
And I know as a kid seeing things like that, it was tough to get people together.
Yeah, we were talking a little about this over lunch, and like I said, there's been some studies done. A lot of these have come out of Illinois and Iowa, as a matter of fact, on rural community tourism development and what elements contributed to the success of projects. One of those was local leadership, and I have found that true in Utah in some of the work I've done. You have to have 1, 2, or 3 individuals that are kind of the spark plugs, and they get excited and they have a vision and they realize the potential of what could be. They're connected and well thought of in the community, and they can get others excited. And without those spark plugs, it doesn't happen, because if a community and the residents aren't into it, it's not going to happen.
So would it be safe to say that the first step then would be finding those spark plugs?
I think so, yeah.
Okay.
And talk about some ideas. The other thing you could do is you could look at other rural communities that have been successful, like, hey, look what they've done, in, let's see, what's another place? North Platte, okay, I know North Platte. That's another place where you can go look at cranes, I guess. Or, look what they've done in such and such place. We could do something similar, but, part of that is that assets inventory, what natural and cultural resources are there that could be developed that are going to be attractive and unique to outside visitors. And this is another thing that we found. We were talking about this earlier, Dave, too. Rural residents, and you said you're from a rural place in the state. Okay, you lived there all your life?
Well, not the state, but yes, most
Okay.
most of my life.
And did you ever get out of state, see the rest of the world?
I am now, and
Okay, you are now.
hopefully more.
Well, there's a lot of people that, they're born in a place, they not true like it is now because people move around, they're doing different careers. But, people that have lived in a place for a long, long time, even though they love it, to them it's like the same old every day, and they don't realize what they have or what they're living in. I found this in Utah, these small rural communities, people are living there and they go, why would anybody want to come here? And I look at the spectacular scenery and they don't know, people are attracted for wildlife watching, or they're interested in the heritage or trails, a whole variety of things. So part of that is increasing awareness of what a community might have and educating the residents about possibilities, what could be. But that leadership is key. That's what we've found in lots of other studies too. Yes?
I think tied in with all of that, I come from a small town here in Nebraska that's actually right near Harlan County Reservoir, so a big thoroughfare. I mean, I live right on the highway that goes to a big recreation area, but our town just didn't, I don't want to say exploit, but we didn't really harness that tourism power that obviously is there by the numbers of visitors that are on your slide. But I'm seeing a lot of that town is aging, and a lot of the youth are leaving. So who's to do the heavy lifting, or how do you draw back a youth element into these towns when they're just getting older? I don't expect my dad to suddenly change his.
He probably won't. Yeah.
But I think like youth my age might, if they thought that there would be jobs in a smaller town.
That's it exactly. If you thought that there could be an opportunity, to do something, develop some kind of small business, and it may or may not be tourism oriented, you would come back and do that because you grew up there, you love that place, you're connected to it, you're attached to it. And that, same thing is happening in Utah, many other states. Our farmers and ranchers are getting old, and that eventually that generation is going to pass away, and their children, a lot of them have no interest in doing, what their parents or grandparents did. Mainly because a lot of them go to college and get degrees and move to the big cities. However, some, and I'm thinking specifically agriculture now, are getting into organic agricultural production, local foods, farmers markets, agritourism, and they see business opportunities and they come back and they can make a go of it. It's not going to happen in every case, but yeah, that's a good point. We know that, farmers and ranchers and our egg producers are aging. What happens when the children don't want to come back and keep things rolling?
I think that with all of this is maybe we don't want to do the farming that our parents did, but if you had a chance to do tourism, something that was more, I don't know, building community or building a different business, it might be a way to bring back in youth to an area. And land is going to go cheap when everyone's selling off. Someone else is going to be.
Well, that's what I said. Who's going to maintain that egg production? It's going to be big agribusiness that's coming in and buying the property and such. But you raise a very good point. People that are also successful in agritourism, other forms of tourism, there has to be a people person there. And I brought this up with some ranching and farming families in Utah. And some of those old guys are really crusty, and they don't want to interact with anybody. Well, they're not going to be a good, tourism person, because you're inviting the public, you're inviting guests to come on your farm and ranch and experience it, and you got to interact with them in a positive way for them to have a good experience. You get good word-of-mouth marketing. Their family, their friends, they'll come back as repeat visitors. So. Fortunately, in Utah, a lot of those farmers and ranchers have huge families, and there's usually, some folks that are those people persons in those families. So.
One more question. Thank you very much.
Okay, well, thank you.